All right, hello. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Nathan Slower here with Disability Advocates of Kent County. And today I am so excited to be joined by Robin, who will be one of our, that was our recording just starting. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Nathan Slower, and we're with Disability Advocates of Kent County. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about Absolutely Accessible Kent, and Patrick, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so as Nathan mentioned, I'm Patrick Parks. I help coordinate our Absolutely Accessible Kent program, and as part of that, our Absolutely Accessible Kent event that's coming up on June 9th. And we are so excited because on June 9th, we are going to be joined by Robin Jones, who joins us today. Robin is going to be our lunch keynote speaker and is going to share some wonderful pearls of wisdom with us on June 9th. But first, we'd like to get to know Robin a little bit before we meet her in person. So Robin, could you just introduce yourselves to our guests, tell them a little bit about, or introduce yourself, to our guests and tell them a little bit about you and how you got into this line of work, what you do currently, etc.
Great. Thank you very much, Patrick. And I'm excited to join everybody for the event coming up. As introduced, my name is Robin Jones, and I am the director of what is known as the Great Lakes ADA Center. Now, the Great Lakes ADA Center was established right after the passage of the ADA in 1991, and it is part of a national network of ADA centers across the country. And our mission is to promote voluntary compliance with the ADA, and that's really what we spend the majority of our time, and I spend the majority of my time doing, and that is providing training, technical assistance, and consultation to anyone that really is either covered under the ADA or has responsibilities under the ADA so that they can understand how it impacts them. I have been in this business for over 40 years. I started out as an occupational therapist working in a clinical setting, primarily working with individuals with spinal cord injuries. I worked at what was at one time known as the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago. During that time, that was just at the start and the beginning of the independent living movement. And we had an independent living center here called Access Living that served the city of Chicago, but there was not any independent living in the suburban area or outside of the city. And I had several of the people I worked with that had spinal cord injuries that lived in the suburban areas and were at a loss when they got out of the rehab setting without a lot of supports and services in the community. And so a couple of them approached me. I had at the time been going back to school to get a degree in public administration. I really liked policy, and I was really getting kind of into more policy issues, and said, hey, would you work with us? We've got a legislator who's really interested in an independent living center in the suburban area, but needs some leadership. And so I started working with them, and we actually formed a new independent living center, and I became the director of what was known as Progress Center for Independent Living, serving the suburban Cook County area. That was when the ADA was going about. So I was very actively involved in promoting the ADA. We were doing many different things at the grassroots level to get support from our legislators for the passage of the ADA. And so when the ADA actually was passed and these grants came out, that established these ADA centers, I was approached by the University of Illinois at Chicago about helping them write that grant and using the disability community as a part of that process. And so I did that. And once it got up and running, they came to me and said, hey, want to come and be the director of it? So it was an interesting transition from independent living, where I'd already been working with people in the community, living independently in the community, to doing this work, which was really to add on to promote living in the community and trying to really affect change and see how we could support the implementation of the ADA and be a place where people could come to where they didn't have a fear of getting sued, or they didn't have a fear of, their answer being the wrong and somebody coming out and picketing or anything of that nature with them, that they could really come to a trusted source where we could assist them in trying to figure out really what they needed to do. So I've kind of been an evolution in my career from direct services with people with disabilities to live independently in the community to now supporting them from a policy perspective, living independently in the community.
That's a really cool evolution. And I'm really interested too in maybe how that specific journey has shaped your approach today. I think you bring a little bit of a unique lens, as you said, having, worked with individuals in the community on the occupational therapy side as well. And so how do you think that has sort of shaped your approach to policy and bringing things into practice?
Well, I mean, I think it's been interesting. I think it helps. It's been an advantage because I have that perspective already, working with people. I myself have a hidden disability. So, working with people directly and such has helped to shape how I feel and how I've seen things evolve. I've really watched it, in my evolution as a professional and then going into independent living from that, mode of do it to them instead of doing it with them. And so that has really been something that has changed over time. And I think that has shaped kind of how I have approached things, that I've always wanted to make sure that people with disabilities were a center and a focus of the work that I did. So even if I'm working with an employer, it's not just about me having a conversation with the employer, but I want to know the perspective of the employee that they're working with. What's that person experiencing? What are the issues and things? Not just how that employer sees it, but also how that individual sees it. Also, I've really seen an evolution in how the disability community has become involved and more active and more vocal, and where they used to in the earlier days before the ADA, and when they still had legal protections, but not the same kind of legal protections, where there often was more of a tendency for people to wait for somebody else to take action, not always direct action. And I think that the ADA and that movement, I mean, I think it started with the independent living one, but it's really grown, where people have really said, hey, I can really make a difference in my community. I can really go out and educate and try to affect change. And now I have a right to do that. It's not just me asking, because I want you to do it, or that it would be a good thing to do, but it really is actually, I have a right to this. And I think that's really been a shift of people being, kind of going out nicely saying, hey, would you just do this, to, hey, I have a right to this and you need to do this, and if you don't do this, there's a consequence to you not doing that. So I think that's really been an evolution and a change.
And would you say that the organizations, the entities that you've worked with over the years, have you seen that tenor change as well, to where they're sort of seeing the benefits of accessibility? They're seeing, the positives, as opposed to maybe just viewing it as an object with which, they have to comply. Are they starting to see the positive awareness and the things that can come out of that, in terms of accessing a broader employment pool, accessing a broader customer pool, those types of things?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, I think it hasn't gone as fast as I would like it to go. I still sometimes am surprised when some of the things I hear from people and say, oh my gosh, we're 32 years and you're still, we're still having this conversation, but in large part, I think one of the huge shifts is that I think we more and more see people coming to us proactively and stuff, instead of us having to go to them. We're hearing more and more of businesses coming to us and say, hey, we want to be more accessible. We want to have more diverse employee pool. We recognize that when we do these kinds of things, that it doesn't just serve one population, but it serves more, individuals. So like putting, I still have a store, I can still remember, where a store owner complained about potentially doing an automatic door. And they had gotten a lot of pushback in their community about needing one and such, because they had really heavy glass doors to open up their store. And so they did install it. And after the fact, that business owner said, that really increased their overall pool of people who came in, because they were so much easier. So moms with strollers and, individuals who might have in the past had avoided their store because of the fact that, that door was really heavy, type of thing, and had a hard time independently getting in and out of it and stuff like that. So they really saw the benefit of those kinds of things. And I like to hear those stories from business, because that really gets to the core of what we're talking about. A lot of times it really is about access for everyone, not just access for, one population or two populations. That really, when we start to look at these issues and the majority of what we've done to try to change society to identify and be more accessible for people with disabilities has actually served a greater and wider population of people. And that's a lot of what I'll be talking about in my presentation, is really kind of helping people get past that point of the fact that this is a legal obligation where, it's going to cost me money, or something of that nature, to really understanding that this is something that, all of us benefits from. And I always remind people that, the ADA covers you birth to death. And it's, one of those things that it doesn't matter, anyone can acquire a disability at any point, at any time in their life, and can be impacted by what the ADA has done.
That's awesome to hear, and a nice little teaser there for your presentation coming up on June 9th. I'm excited for folks to hear from you. What do you, and maybe as a little bit of an additional teaser, you have this interesting perspective of working in the field, working in the movement as the ADA was being passed and advocated for, and now we're coming up on 33 or 32 years of
32 years.
I called myself there, 1990, right? 32 years. 32 years. And so what do you think is what would you say is sort of the biggest change agent, or what do you see, not to delve too far into your presentation for June 9th, but what do you see as sort of the future of the ADA? Where can it go? Having already been with us for 32 years, what does the future look like? What can we look forward to?
Well, I think there's always, room for improvement. The ADA, there's certain things that we still haven't reached yet. We still have a high unemployment rate of people with disabilities. However, I think, with COVID and COVID-19 has really brought forth, a new frontier in regards to telework and everything. So there's a lot more opportunities that have been opened up potentially for people with disabilities in that realm. So I think we're going to see some changes, and I think that the ADA has helped that. But I think that there's more to be done and promote virtual platforms being more accessible, and more engagement for people being able to participate in a virtual world that they hadn't been able to before. And also, interestingly enough, I think that the whole concept of accessibility has gotten a different lens placed on it with COVID also, to some degree, as we've had to do social distancing, and we've had to do a lot more of these kinds of things. There's been a lot more focus on, and thought about, hey, how does that impact people with disabilities? How does that impact persons who are blind, who need to stay 6 feet away? And how do they know what 6 feet, is, and what do we need to do in the queues in the community? What are we about touchless, where we've, relied so much on buttons or hitting something or operating mechanisms and things, and now we're going to so touchless. Well, gee, these are now things that we're exploring, that not just as a disability concept, but this is a concept for, pandemic, or for the future of, wellness and health and other kinds of things, for people, larger spaces, more open spaces with wider passageways and things of that nature. So I think in a lot of ways, why we've had a lot of bad, in the last couple of years with COVID and such, the ADA and the COVID and other kinds of things that have been happening in society have really offering us new opportunities for architects, designers, businesses, employers, et cetera, to really look at in a different lens of what and how to engage people in general. And by doing that, overall, then people with disability gets more included in the whole overall fabric, instead of the special population approach that we have so often seen taken. So now that people with disabilities are more included in that conversation and that discussion, than being seen as an afterthought. And I think that's a future direction that we're going to continue to be going on.
That's awesome, and we look forward to hearing more about that future on June 9th, and look forward to meeting you in person, Robin, and being with all our wonderful guests that will join us that day. And thank you so much for taking the time today to chat with us.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to seeing everybody on the 9th.
All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining us, Robin, and we look forward to hearing from her and our 2 other speakers, Hansel Baumann and Jonathan White. Come visit us at dakc.us to register today.